I want to welcome you to the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. This auditorium we're in is called the Conrad T. Prebys Auditorium. Conrad Prebys is a major philanthropist in San Diego. He's a real estate developer who is a very good person. And he's given us lots of money for research here at the Institute, and so we named the auditorium after him. This building that we're an underground facility, obviously, and the set of buildings to the north and south of this, we're under the brick courtyard at the moment. These are, of course, not part of the original Salk Con project. These were built about 20 years ago. And the original institute, as you may have noticed if you haven't been here before, is directly to the west of this. And so there will be plenty of opportunities to walk out there. You can walk out there this evening after. So we're going to go up to the brick courtyard above us for a wine reception after the session this afternoon. And you can wander on down and see the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. The rest of the evening, you're on your own. The plan was you could organize dinners. There's a list of restaurants that was available at the registration desk, so there are plenty of opportunities, a lot of good restaurants in town, many of them very close by. So I encourage you to go out and see the town. A couple of sort of general announcements with regard to posters. If you are a poster presenter, the poster boards are outside. The expectation is that you'll arrive early tomorrow morning and hang your posters up. There are volunteers. Tomorrow morning I'll introduce all the volunteers to you so you know who they are, but tomorrow morning you can go there, get thumbtacks and put up your posters. And of course the poster times that you should be there are indicated in the program. With regard to the presentations given in this auditorium, if you have PowerPoint slides, you should give them to us, and us means either Hannah or there's a fellow in the back there, his name is Kent. Kent is one of the most important people here because Kent controls both the audio visuals and he's filming everything. And so he's an important person to know, especially if you're presenting. So it's really important that you get to us, communicate to us that you have your PowerPoint on a memory stick or you're going to email it or something so that we can get that set up. The dinner is going to be in the foyer outside where we're just hanging out before we came in here. Tomorrow night it'll be all prettied up for the dinner, and there are additional seats available. Hannah has contacted the caterer and we can get more people in, but if you want to go to that, you need to find Hannah to arrange for a ticket to the dinner. Okay? And all the other meals are, those are prearranged, and there'll be continental breakfast out there in the morning, there's lunch out there midday tomorrow, and so on. One other thing is somebody left some keys on the bus. If you don't have your keys, they're at the registration desk. And I think with that, I'll say a little bit at the end of the session, but with that, one important thing I forgot to mention earlier is that the way these different thematic sessions are organized is that typically there is a group of invited speakers and a group of contributed presentations. And so, although it may not have been obvious to you, the invited speakers were the ones that we did over at UCSD, and the contributed papers in the same session are here this afternoon. And that will be the case throughout the rest of these different thematic sessions. And I felt in organizing this that it would be valuable to have as much discussion, substantive discussion as possible to try, because basically what we're trying to do is build bridges across the gulf between neuroscience and architecture. And so there are these chair-facilitated discussions that are put into the program for that purpose. And so I encourage you to be as free and open as possible in these discussions. What we'll do is have the speakers come and sit at this table on stage at the end of each one of these sessions, and that's your opportunity to ask questions, and the chair of the program will try to facilitate that. So that's the general way we've organized things programmatically. And I think that's all I have to say, and I'm going to turn this over to the person who's chairing the rest of this session, who is a member of our board, a member of the faculty at UCSD, Eduardo Macagno.
Nice to see you have made it across the big divide called Torrey Pines North by bus or however else you got here. So I wanted to make a few remarks before launching into the presentations, having to do with what I think we wanted to accomplish with the previous session. The previous session was a way of telling you what things are available that we could use. So we have caves, we have ways of looking at the brain, we have ways of listening to your heart, all of these things. And they're getting better and better and more useful. However, misusing them is actually a high probability thing unless we think very seriously together about how to do that. So neuroscientists and architects have some close similarities. We both really like design, not only the design of the brain, but we like to design good experiments. We like to really think seriously about how to put things together. And of course, that's exactly what architects are interested in as well. Now, the tools that we heard about earlier are, as Todd would say, they're available, they're relatively cheap. Mike Chi's headgear is not totally cheap yet, but he did have a contract to try to get it down to a few $100. That may or may not happen. And in terms of caves, we're trying to develop some designs that could be used that are basically dependent on the technology, which gets cheaper with time, that could be available for every architectural firm to have in their office. I mean, I think that you can see what the value of this might be. And if any of you are interested in exploring that direction, we'd be happy to talk about it. But just briefly, and I'll tell you more about this tomorrow, we are trying to put small caves into Alzheimer's facilities, into clinics, places where we might be able to actually begin to get the kind of data that Ramesh was talking about. On the other hand, I wouldn't advise doing that without really deep thought, because the data, what you get, is what's important. And if we don't know well enough the experiment and what the data means and how to interpret it and how to analyze it and how to use it, then we do ourselves a disservice. And I'm trying to say is that all of these wonderful, almost Pollyannish kinds of things are available, but we need to work together to make use of them. And the nice thing about this session following the earlier one is that all the speakers are making use of things that you saw earlier, either maybe a little different technology, to listen to what is going on in the brain, as we'll hear from the first speaker. But they're doing what I was just talking about. They're looking at interactions and trying to analyze and get some information. Now, my last little pitch, because I think we should move on, is that I think we're moving from thinking about the average person. So, of course, if you're an architect making a house for some, let's say, reasonably well-off person, you focus on the person, and you get a lot of feedback from the person. If you are an architect for a facility for a lot of people, then the design is more trying to fit a lot of people. Now, you've heard about individualized medicine. We all have different brains, right? We respond to things in somewhat different ways, depending on our age, depending on, the status of our brain. And I think we need to think about how design for people with a variety of mental capacities can be achieved, as opposed to trying to build something for some idealized average person. And what I mean by that, I think my colleague Michael Arbib may talk a bit about that. It's, how do you design on the basis of what the responses are? Now, another point which I want to make with respect to this, and Ramesh made that point at the end of the discussion, is that people change. We make a building that will last a certain period of time. And so even the users that we are trying to focus on at a particular time are going to be 10 years older in 10 years. Their brains are going to be somewhat different. The way they deal with that environment is going to be different. So I think the challenge for the architects is, how do you design a structure that is appropriate for a lot of different brains which are changing in time? Now, that's not a minor challenge. And I think that neuroscientists can bring in some information about what the changes are and what the variety is and how to get an idea of that. But the challenge to the architect is how to use that. How are we going to take what we know about the brain and use it in a way that is appropriate and successful? Now, as I said, this session is about making use of some of these technologies in very interesting ways, and I'd like to call on our first speaker,